by 8 o'clock, I think, or 8:30. Sorry, I can't remember when the end is. Good. Okay, we're recording. Awesome. So, Toby, if you could move to the next slide, please. So I really wanted to start out with a land acknowledgement for tonight's presentation. And I'll just start out by saying hello, bonjour, miigwech. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. To acknowledge these traditional territories is to recognize their longer history, one that predates the establishment of the earliest European colonies. We are guests on their land. It is also to acknowledge these territories' significance to the Indigenous peoples who lived and continue to live upon them. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to recognize the importance of the lands upon which we call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. We acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. It is with deep humility that we offer our gratitude for their contributions to our communities, having respect for all. Please join me in a moment of reflection to think about the harms of both the past and present, and to consider how we do and can, each in our own way, move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Thank you. So I'm going to give you a really, sorry, I have a dog that's kind of antsy right now. One's in, one's out. And Friends of Wellers Bay was established in 1988. And at the time, the main reason for being was to sort of be the steward of the channel between Wellers Bay and Lake Ontario. The first dredging took place in 1989, and the Friends of Wellers Bay undertook annual fundraising to maintain the channel and the breakwall. In 1989, we were incorporated and developed a constitution. And then in 2015, the City of Quinte West took over responsibility for dredging, and are doing did dredging in 2015, 2017, and from what we're hearing, it's going to happen in February of 2022. And their responsibility it's their responsibility moving forward. So fast forward to sort of 2016 or so, and once the City of Quinte West took over the dredging, the Friends of Wellers Bay had to sort of rethink what their reason for being was. And so a number of things were undertaken to help to understand sort of what the community needs were, and understand what the state of Wellers Bay was at the time. And so we undertook an ambassador program and extensive community outreach. A State of the Bay report was produced, and in early this year, the board approved a strategic plan to take us through the next 5 years. And so next slide, please, Toby. A few things that I just wanted to highlight. Our value statement that we as a board determined is that we believe that good governance and an engaged membership will inspire sound stewardship of Wellers Bay. And our vision is to endeavor to be the trusted and respected voice of all members for the enhancement, enjoyment, and preservation of the natural environment of Wellers Bay. Next slide, please. I'm not going to read through each one of these, but they're there for your review. And again, this presentation will be made available to you after tonight. And so these are just some of the ways in which we are going to achieve that vision that we identified. We have a number of things on our plate. And through that, next slide, please, Toby. we've identified 4 top goals that we've been working on implementing for the last year, and these will take us through till 2025, I think. So environmental protection and stewardship, and a number of these things we're going to be talking about tonight. So I'm not going to go into any detail, but one of the things we are working closely with the City of Quinte West to support the dredging of the channel and monitoring the condition of the breakwall. And another important thing to note is that Friends of Wellers Bay is responsible for the safe channel navigation through the installment of the buoys. You know, we do safety and awareness signage. We notify DFO, you know, once the buoys are in and out, and then we update the logbook regularly, which is record, you know, just record keeping that we have to do. Next slide, please, Toby. Our second priority goal is shoreline and property protection and development. And so a couple of things that we've been working on this year, we actively participated in the development of Quinte Conservation's strategic plan process that they undertook recently. And we are working on creating a repository of kind of the laws and regulations that pertain to, you know, shoreline property protection and other property development. And it's just, you know, sort of a one-stop shop for what you know, if you're looking at doing some property work, proper shoreline work, you know, what are some of the things you need to take into consideration? You know, what rules and what responsibilities you have as a property owner. Next slide, please. Our third priority goal is community building and communication. And essentially around that, tonight is one of those actions that we're undertaking, you know, having events like this evening where we're you know, educating about programs and opportunities that are out there for our membership and our community. We are working with our municipalities, Prince Edward County and City of Quinte West, building relationships, and the conservation authorities, and any provincial and federal government agencies and local businesses, the community itself, and the membership. And we're working to do all of those, to build relationships in those areas. Another thing that we're actively involved in is member outreach and doing, you know, finding ways to communicate with our membership. We're doing volunteer recruitment. We have some other activities that you perhaps have participated in the past. We partnered with Flashback February, which is a Prince Edward County initiative, museums, I believe, and that's held annually in February. We're doing a photo contest that will be ongoing. And coming up, we have a trash bash and beach cleanup scheduled for August 14th. And we also have, if you haven't noticed, we've updated our website, and we're on several social media platforms, including Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And we're also do e-blasts. Next slide, please, Toby. And our last priority goal, but not least, and it's probably the one that's seen the most activity this year, is going through and updating our constitution, developing bylaws. We are a charitable not-for-profit organization, and so the rules governing charities in Ontario are changing in the next while, and so we wanted to make sure that we were up to date and you know, sort of meeting what the new rules were going to be guiding us with. We're also we also have a draft policies and procedures in place. We've updated our budgeting and financial management. Everything is online, which is a huge milestone. The strategic plan implementation and review is an ongoing process. We discuss it at every meeting. Another date to note is that the AGM is scheduled this year for August the 10th. And, you know, mark that in your calendars. And at this time, we're still planning for a virtual event. So please you know, keep that in your mind. And another very important thing that we're turning our attention to is AGM board recruitment and member recruitment. And one of the things that's really important to note is, you know, when we developed our budget, it's very clear that we operate, you know, we need to up our memberships to increase our revenues to the organization. And we have been told by the person who is a volunteer, Steve Raymond, who has been doing the buoys and putting the markers in the channel, that we have some signage and buoys that need to be replaced this year. And so we're going to be really putting a push on for a membership drive and oh, sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. Membership drive and a donation drive, because we are a charity, and so donations are accepted as well. And you know, looking to increase our revenues in that way. Next slide, please. Does anyone have any questions on any of that sort of history, where we're at with Friends of Whalers Bay right now? I'm happy to address them now, or we can save them for later if you know, in our last few minutes. Toby, are you seeing anything in the chat?
No, there's nothing in the chat, though. Just a reminder to folks, if you have questions that you want handled and you don't want to forget them, or you feel like you don't want to raise your hand immediately or jump in, don't hesitate to use that chat. We're happy to moderate that for our speakers this evening as well.
Great. So maybe we can move on to our next presentation. Oh, and I will introduce Toby. She's already introduced herself. Toby is our secretary for Friends of Whalers Bay, and just an amazing volunteer for the organization. And thank you, Toby, for all that you do. And Toby's going to talk a little bit about the Lake Partner Program.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, the other volunteers that would be relevant in this are folks from the Ontario Cottagers Association, or sorry, Federation of Ontario Cottagers Associations. And unfortunately, it wasn't something we could coordinate with their schedule this evening. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the program, although the caveat here is I have not yet tested with them, and I don't belong to either the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, nor do I work for the Dorset Environmental Science Centre, that's the lab, by the way, where the water samples go under this program. Shortly, you're going to hear about another water sampling program, but we wanted to highlight both of these just so you are aware of the differences of the two programs and how those water samplings work and how you can get involved in some ways. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about those things. The Lake Partner Program is a volunteer-based monitoring program for Ontario's inland lakes. The folks you can see on screen help to coordinate looking at these samples that are taken in. When there's monthly water sampling done, they are sent into the Dorset Environmental Science Centre, which is a fully functioning lab that tests the water samples for different features. And this is something that Whalers Bay, Friends of Whalers Bay, specifically Karen Mauk, who big shout out to her, who was the secretary for this organization preceding me, and my mentor, and I hope to fill her very fantastic boots one day. And we've got other members on the board who are also jumping in to look at doing these water samples moving forward. Karen's been doing this now for 11 years for Friends of Whalers Bay, so that's a great data set to be collecting every month between May and October, going out there to do the sampling. You might be wondering where those samples occur. With the Lake Partner Program, the samples are designed for deep water selections. So there are two places on your screen. The one, this is actually on the right-hand side of your screen, is the south of the bay. This section here being the spit out to Lake Ontario. So this section just off of Edward Point, Edward Drive, is the deepest part. Now, Wellers Bay, as you all likely know, is not that deep. 24 feet is about the maximum for the bay. I've recently been in contact with the Cottagers Association and Dorset Environmental Center, and we're going to be starting to do a different sample site up here at the north section of Wellers Bay, just to see if there are variations in those numbers and to see if, with the channel being so close here, if that impacts those values in any way. The deepest water out here is not quite the 24-foot mark. It's just over 20 feet. But again, that's the deepest section of the bay that we can find in the north section. So we look forward to doing that shortly. So what are we testing for? What are they at Dorset Environmental Center actually testing for when we submit the water samples? There are 4 things that they're definitely looking for. The 3 primary ones, though, are phosphorus, calcium, and clarity. They can get a number of readings because we're submitting the water samples to them at the lab. There's a whole bunch of data sets that they can pull out of it, but the ones that are typically reported on are the phosphorus, calcium, and clarity. What I would like to share up front is that our bay is in a fantastic state of health, and that's great news. We definitely want to be looking out to see that those numbers aren't shifting over time and that we continue to be a great space. And as we begin to see more development, as we continue to see different climate changes impacting Lake Ontario as a whole, and we are, well, we're Wellers Bay, we are an extension in some regard of Lake Ontario, of course. We need to keep an eye on how those things are progressing so that we're aware of what can be done to, I guess, react to those situations. Ideally, we're more proactive. And I think that's where we're going to get into more conversation with our partner programs and other water sampling that happens to know what else we can do to be proactive rather than reactive to these numbers. I would like to start out with a fantastic note. A lot of times when we start talking about data sampling and climate change and whatnot, we have negative numbers to share. And thanks to both reactive and subsequently then continued proactive efforts on many folks' behalves, the acid rain has reduced in its acidity levels by 50% since the 1980s. And that's had a really positive impact on our environment. So ideally, we'll keep seeing more of those fantastic impacts. And the reason that we're looking for these numbers is to give us an indication of how well we're doing and where we need to do better. So you can see the numbers. I've just jumped into the data sets over the period of the last, well, there were 9 years sampled, although that are in report format. The lab was not operating last year with COVID, so the 2020 numbers did not happen. And I do believe that Karen is already testing for 2021. So as far as I know, the lab is back open again and we should see more numbers, but the reports are out for those 9 years. And there's some fluctuations. What I can tell you about those fluctuations is they're not linear. So while there's a range in calcium, for example, from 34 to 57 in units of measurement, and likewise in phosphorus from 8 to 21 over those 9 years, it's not in a straight line. So it's a fluctuation in more like a roller coaster format where it's up and down, and it does bounce around those average numbers. Fluctuations are bound to happen with different weather patterns and situations. There's lots of great information online, and I'm sure Amelia can talk to us more about that as she gets into her talk. So I don't want to overdo this. There's some overlap in the testing that happens. One of the reasons why we're excited about the Lake Partner Program is its long-standing data set and it goes to a lab, which is great. One of the reasons I'm excited to hear from Amelia tonight, and the thing about water rangers, just to compare the two, is that it really allows us a chance to get out as citizen scientists around the bay and be a little bit more interactive, where we're doing the readings right on the spot and submitting those. And the site is a little bit more immediate in its data presentation, and she'll tell us more about that. One of the things to watch for, though, is that we're keeping those numbers in good ranges. Now, a high calcium is great in that it allows for aquatic life to live, especially those animals or critters, I guess, that need shells, that really draw on calcium to build their bodies. Without the calcium in the water, you'll find there's a lot less life in the water. With phosphorus, we're happily in the mid-range. If there's too low phosphorus, it's problematic. When we think about algae, that's a great thing because there's less algae in the water, and we're quite worried about algae blooms. We don't want the phosphorus levels to be too high. It really does feed those algae blooms. So we're in a sweet spot, mid-range, and our clarity is also good. You can have too low and too high, though, so it's nice to say it's right there in the middle. Regarding the blue-green algae, and I've recently had a neighbor who is moving into the area inquire with Friends of Wellers Bay about our algae situation. And so I did a little bit of snooping around just to gather some points for you folks tonight, which you can see on the screen here. One of the things that we're aware of if we've been around the bay for a while, or other water areas in this region, is that we see those blooms come up a little bit more in late summer, early fall. They are impacted by warmer areas. One of the things to watch for here as well is that they thrive in areas that are exactly Friends of Wellers Bay zone. Our Wellers Bay area is shallow, slow moving water. And part of the impact on that is phosphorus, of course, feeding our plant life. We want to make sure that those phosphorus numbers stay down so that our algae blooms continue to stay low. And how do we do that? We're also going to hear from program partners this evening who can help us understand how we can specifically maintain a natural shoreline, reduce agricultural runoff. If we have septic systems around the bay, it's our responsibility as property owners to keep those in good working order. And that has an impact as well, a positive impact when they're working properly. We don't want leaks. When we start to reduce the phosphates in our detergents and things, and likewise the phosphates in our fertilizers, we're improving the situation around the bay. And I would like to hear more from Amelia on that, because she's going to have way more to tell you about those data sets than I can. Thanks very much.
I'd like to introduce everybody to Amelia Duguay, works as a Sustainable Development Coordinator at Water Rangers. In this role, Amelia manages all things related to communication and social media and plays a big part in Water Rangers fundraising activities. Before joining the Water Rangers team, Amelia attended McGill University, where she earned a Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies and a Master's of Science in Integrated Water Resources Management. Amelia will be attending law school at the University of Houston beginning in fall 2021 and hopes to one day work as an energy lawyer. So Emily, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that introduction. So as was mentioned, my name is Amelia and I work for Water Rangers. So I do a lot of things at Water Rangers. A lot of it is involving communication and fundraising, but I've also become somewhat of a web designer too. So it's a lot of good stuff. And I'm very excited to be talking with you all today. So I do have a lot of stuff to go through. So if at any point, things are a little bit confusing, or if I talk a bit fast, of course, feel free to enter any questions in the chat and I will answer them to the best of my ability later on. But I did want to start off by talking about Water Rangers and why it was started, because it really is a beautiful story. I find it very inspirational, and I think that it really speaks to, why we do what we do in the first place. So I'll let you go to the next slide. Perfect. Okay, so this lake here is Lake McGloshin in rural Quebec. It's about a 40-minute drive north of Ottawa. So Water Rangers was all started back in 2014, actually. And the way that it came to be was that our co-founder, Kat Kavanaugh, she moved back to Ottawa from living abroad for a number of years. She was living in England, working as a web designer, but in 2014, moved back home and was able to, at that point, spend a lot of time at her family cottage at Lake McGlashan. So in this picture, that's the lake itself. The white building in the distance is the cottage. It's super beautiful. I've been there a number of times now, but this was her favorite place in the world. So one chilly morning in spring of 2014, Kat's dad asked her if she wanted to go out and help him test the water. So since she was a water lover, she of course said yes, and they went out and did the phosphorus testing on the lake. So her dad wasn't a scientist, but he had been doing the phosphorus testing there for a very long time, about 15 years, because he was part of the Lake Association. That was his job. So they went out and they did the tests. And then after they finished, she asked her dad, so what do the results mean? And he said to her, well, actually, I'm not sure. And so she asked, okay, well, are they good or bad? And once again, he said, I'm not sure. So finally, she asked, okay, well, how did the results compare to last year? You've been doing this for so long, surely you must be able to compare them over time. And so he said, well, let's go check it out. And he pulled out a big filing cabinet full of results. And so because she had been working as a web designer for quite a long time and is very tech savvy and all of that, she was blown away and she thought, surely there must be a better way of doing this and of keeping track of this data. After all, he was part of a lake association, which meant that he wasn't the only one interested in this data, and he should have a better way of being able to share it. You can't really, lug around a big filing cabinet full of papers everywhere you go. So she did some digging to see if she could find a good website or platform where you could share this data. And she actually couldn't find anything. There didn't exist anything like that at the time. So she took it upon herself to create one. And that's how Water Rangers first came about. So she and a team of other web designers and web developers entered aqua hacking, which is a pretty cool competition that happens every year. It actually was the first year that it happened back in 2015, and she won, and she was able to start the Water Rangers website and then the app shortly thereafter. So that was super great. They became a nonprofit, all that good stuff. And shortly after that, people started to express that they wanted to help collect water quality data, but that they couldn't access affordable and reliable tools that would allow them to do so. So once again, Kat, being the go-getter that she is, she did some looking, tried to find those tools for people, and they just simply didn't exist. Everything that was on the market was very expensive, or whenever things were more affordable, you had to sacrifice quality to get that. So she ended up creating the Water Rangers test kit, which I have with me here today, which people can now use to test for very basic parameters that tell you more about water health. So I'll go through this a bit more in a second, but I did want to talk a bit about what happened in 2017. So everything with the organization and the app and the website and the kits, this was all happening around 2015, 2016. And then in 2017, I like to say that this is when the stars sort of aligned, because this was the year that WWF published the first edition of their watershed reports. I'm not sure what happened to the slides, but I don't think I need them, so I'll continue. So basically, this big report that WWF Canada released was the first nationwide assessment of water quality in Canada. So what this big report told us was that most of the water bodies in Canada, we actually don't have enough data about to properly assess. So this is, of course, very worrisome. You can't make good decisions for water if you don't know how well it's doing in the first place. So this was really, I would say, when the movement took off, and we've been gaining momentum ever since. So today, how we basically work is that people collect data with these test kits, and then they upload it to our platform using either our website or our app. And then we work with other organizations to help their data get into the hands of not only more people, but the right people. So for example, we're currently working with an organization called DataStream. And DataStream works a lot like Water Rangers, but they were designed with policymakers in mind, whereas we were designed with citizen scientists in mind. So basically, whenever a group signs up to, use Water Rangers to collect and store their data on, they can choose to share their data with DataStream, and then it becomes more accessible and visible to other people like decision makers and people in other organizations that may need to use this data for scientific purposes. So it's pretty cool. So another thing that I will say about the kits and the platform and all that, as much as data collection is super, super important and vital and is a big part of what we do, so is connection to nature. So since we started, since we made these test kits and since we've really picked up in speed in what we're doing, we've been running programs every year to help more people test the water. And what we found since the beginning of doing that, and we find it every single time, is that when people test the water and they learn more about it, they feel way more connected to it, and they're way more likely to want to do other things to help protect it. So that's really become the other piece of what we do, is fostering that sense of connection with water, and helping people develop, a stronger sense of responsibility towards it. So in the Water Rangers test kit, I'll just kind of go through it very quickly. And I'm really glad that the Lake Partner program was already talked about, because there is some overlap, but I do think that the two programs complement each other quite well. So in the test kit, everything that you have in it, it gives you results right away in the field. So we don't work with any labs or anything like that, just because, a lot of places and a lot of people, they don't have access to that, especially if they're located in like the middle of nowhere, like the far north, that kind of stuff. They usually, a lab would be a few hours away, and the turnaround time is quite long. So with all of our tests, you get your results right away. You can test for basic things that do tell you a decent amount about water quality, but the most important thing is that you're testing for these things continuously over time, so then you can see trends and then learn what's normal. And then if anything deviates from those trends, it might, sound the alarm and prompt you to do further testing, which is when, the lab testing and that kind of stuff is really, really important. So in the kit, we have tests for dissolved oxygen. We have conductivity meter, which is probably my favorite thing to use. It is pretty correlated with water quality in general. Of course, it's not a perfect correlation, but there are some pretty interesting studies on that. We have a thermometer, and as was mentioned, with phosphorus increasing the likelihood of algal blooms happening, temperature plays a big role in that too. So even a temperature change in a few degrees over the course of many years could have pretty bad consequences for the water. We include the sucky disc, and that's what you use to measure water clarity. So same thing that you would measure with the Lake Partners program. We have test strips that test for pH, alkalinity, chlorine, and hardness in the test kit. I don't have mine here. I think I was using them for something else, but they're really, really easy to use. They're actually spa test strips, but the reason why we use them is because they're very accurate and very inexpensive compared to professional probes. And then we also include other little things like, of course, a sample cup, some gloves and Whirlpack bags for, things you might want to pick up and take a bit of a closer look at. We include this selfie stick, which we use to attach our sample cups to, so you can get those hard to reach places. And then we have our super easy to read field guides, and these just walk you through how to use all of the tools, and they tell you about all of the different parameters and what your results might mean, what normal ranges generally are, even though every water body has its own normal, and so on and so forth. So that's pretty much it for water rangers. What I will say is that our website has a ton of super helpful resources. So we're posting new things all the time. We're always making new videos to help people learn how to use our tools and learn how to use the website and the app. I'm personally, even though I work on the computer all day long, I'm not super tech savvy myself. So having those types of videos I find really helpful. So yeah, we're always available, you know, for helpful like webinars and that kind of stuff too. So if anyone ever has any questions, just reach out and someone will definitely schedule a time to talk to you or point you in the direction of a helpful resource. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me. So I'll leave it there. Hope this wasn't too fast. I didn't want to make it too long. But yeah, of course, I'm available for questions later.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amelia. I think one of the things that's really exciting about this is the fact that we actually have 2 kits, and we're going to be testing at the end of every month, the last weekend, I believe, of every month. Toby and I were out for the first time at the end of May, and it is really quite fascinating to, you know, go through the process and watch the results sort of coming up instantaneously. And anyway, so we're very thrilled to be part of this, and being that this is very new for us at Friends of Wellers Bay, you know, we do want to sort of make it a teaching moment kind of thing, and perhaps involve youth, and we just haven't framed that up yet because this is very new to us. So we'll be working very closely with Amelia, you know, to develop programming as we move forward with this program. And I'm not sure if anybody has any questions.
You actually, I just thought of 3 small other things to add. You inspired me by what you said. I'll just say as well, so even for me, so I'm from a really small town in Northern Ontario, Timmins, if anyone's familiar with that. But one of the, you know, most amazing things about the kids and the sense of connection that they really foster, I went to a lake in town last year that I have been to like hundreds, if not thousands of times before. But whenever I had my kit with me and I was, you know, testing the water for these different parameters, I for sure saw it in a whole new way. I noticed things that I had never noticed about it before, even like things that were honestly quite concerning. Like I noticed algae that I had never really noticed before and things like that. Conductivity, as I mentioned, it is correlated with water quality in a way. It was very high for the location that I was at. So those things were quite eye-opening for me, and we've heard from many people that they've had similar experiences. Another thing which is super great and which I didn't expect until it happened to me, there has never ever been a time that I've been out testing that someone has not come up to me and asked me what I'm doing. Like I swear every single time it happens. And even that I feel like leads to these moments of connection that you probably wouldn't have otherwise, because not only am I meeting people in my community, but the people that I talk to whenever they see this big blue bag, I feel like it sparks something in them as well. And then sometimes they're prompted to learn more. We include postcards in these goodie bags, we call them, and they come with the kits. But those postcards are to give away in moments like that. They kind of just tell people a bit more about what we do and all that kind of stuff and how they can get involved if they want to. And then the last thing that I'll say is that with our app, it's really easy to use and we're always trying to improve it. But one of the best things about it is that you can take pictures while you're out in the field and upload them with your observations. And pictures for sure speak like more than 1,000 words when it comes to water quality monitoring, especially with things like algae that are becoming more and more problematic. Thankfully not in Wellers Bay, but in a lot of areas, algae is so bad. It's not always the bad kind that makes you sick, but sometimes it's the nuisance algae like conifer. So being able to take pictures of that and record that is so helpful, because things like that aren't always captured in the numbers. So if you all do use the app, or even if you just have your phone and you don't have the app and you want to record your data later, I would always encourage you to take pictures because they are so helpful and so valuable and provide so much helpful context to the things that you're recording.
Great tips. Thanks, Amelia.
No problem.
I'm really excited. We're very excited to be part of this program, and looking forward to what the data is going to show us as we move forward through the season. And I'm not sure if anybody has any questions, but I would like to just put it out there too that if anyone is interested in kind of seeing it happen, maybe let us know in the chat, and we can make sure that we reach out next time we're doing testing, and see if we can organize just a time where people can see how it's done, kind of thing. So we're happy to do that, at least to start, before we can, until we have a program in place. So are there any questions for Amelia? Toby's just put up our email in the chat. And so if you're interested, please pop us an email. Okay, well, thanks so much, Amelia, for your presentation, and we're really looking forward to working with you throughout the season. We'll move on perhaps to our next speaker, and I'm happy to introduce our next speaker, who is Maya Navarrete from Quinte Conservation, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with Maya, as she has presented at several of our annual general meetings over the years, and is a regular fixture in her outreach work that she does. So Maya is the Outreach and Stewardship Program Coordinator for Quinte Conservation, and she has been with them since 2007. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in Biology and Environmental Sciences from Trent University. And Maya is joining us tonight from the shorelines of Kennebec Lake in Arden, and we'll be talking about landowner stewardship programming available to Wellers Bay residents with a focus on the Natural Edge Shoreline Planting Program. And Maya is also joined tonight by Lindsay Huffman and Robert Ormston, Quinte Conservation Stewardship Assistants for the summer of 2021. So Maya, please welcome, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, well, thanks first of all for the invitation. It's always a welcomed invitation to come and join your group, and this year just happens to be virtually. And then I'd just like to open by thanking your group here, Friends of Wellers Bay, and all of your members for all the great work that you're doing on Wellers Bay in terms of protecting and preserving it, and not just environmentally, but the cultural significance and natural significance of the area, and social significance as well. So you've been involved with our strategic planning process, as was mentioned in an earlier opening there, and we are building our 10-year strategic plan. And it's wonderful to have community groups as a part of that. And one thing that I heard in all of those brainstorming sessions that just kept coming up over and over and over again was the importance of collaboration. And we have seen that. I've seen it in all my years at Quinte, and we know the true value of that. None of us can do it alone. And so this panel that you've pulled together tonight of all these different organizations and the programs they offer, it's a perfect example of that collaboration and how we can all do so much more when we're working together. So again, thank you so much to your entire group for all of that. So we'll just move to the next slide here. I have quite a few slides that move rather quickly, so I'll just say next for the next one here. So Quinte Conservation is one of 36 conservation authorities that are spread out across Ontario. Now the conservation authorities tend to be in the more populated areas, so you won't find them across all of Ontario, but you will find most of them across the southern regions where much of the population exists. Quinte Conservation is actually three conservation authorities that amalgamated into one. And so we have a number of watersheds that we manage. So we have all of Prince Edward County and all of its sub-watersheds. Then we have the entire Moira watershed, and then the Salmon watershed and Napanee watershed. So formerly they were the Prince Edward Region Conservation Authority, Napanee Region Conservation Authority, and Moira Region Conservation Authority, and now all as one. So next slide. So our region is approximately 6,000 square kilometers, and we are a not-for-profit environmental protection agency, and we have been operating since 1947. So there are a number of programs that we deliver. Our main core mandated programs right up top there is flooding and low water forecasting and warning. So we monitor levels in our lakes and rivers and streams and forecast and put out warning when we see flooding may occur, or the situation we find ourselves in, more commonly, drought. So we also own dams, and we operate those dams all across the watershed to help manage water levels the best we can. We do the permitting, planning, and regulations for any proposed development in floodplain or on sensitive lands. And so that's through the Conservation Authorities Act. How many of your members may know us when they want to do work on their properties. They come through our office for their permits and approvals. We also deliver the Drinking Water Source Protection Program. We own and manage over 30,000 acres of land, and we do watershed health monitoring. And so we do sample across the watershed, mostly in inlets and outlets of the different river systems to give us an idea of changing watershed conditions. To have groups on the lakes, sampling is key. We don't have a lot of lake sampling sites that we do annually. And so to have any of that extra data is extremely important to us. So we will pull data from Lake Partner and now from Water Rangers. And we do crunch all of this data that we have in forest cover and forested riparian and wetland cover. I'll talk a little bit about that tonight to get a gauge of that watershed health. And we produce watershed report cards every 5 years. And I will have links to that in the presentation this evening. And so then what I'm primarily here to talk to you about is the landowner stewardship and outreach. So we take what we know about that watershed and we reach out to partners and work with them to bring programming and grant opportunities to our landowners to help improve watershed health right across our region. Next. I've been saying watershed a lot. Watershed is how our conservation authority boundaries are set. It's not by political boundaries, it's how the water drains down the land. So the Prince Edward Region watershed, this one happens to have a lot of sub-watersheds. So I did want to put this map up here. All those red lines show basically the elevation on the land. So you've got the water that flows down into rivers, creeks, and streams that then flows down into lakes. So for Prince Edward County, you are very much connected here to the Bay of Quinte and Lake Ontario, and you've got some of your inland lakes. For Wellers Bay, you capture water from the Consicon subwatershed. Now, unfortunately, you can't really see it here well. Whoever's running the slides, maybe you can take the mouse and just show the Consicon subwatershed. Sorry, I thought I had put a little star there, but I don't see it now. So this is the land base that will drain down to Consicon Lake towards Wellers Bay. Now, of course, you've also got some of your watershed in the Quinte West area as well. And so when we're talking about something like the Moira River watershed, that's the entire land base that drains to the Moira River that then empties into the Bay of Quinte. And same for the Salmon River and the Napanee River. Okay, next, please. So just to take you back in history a little bit, because I think it's really important to understand where we started and where we've come and where we're trying to get back to. If you were to be here on the land and look at it 150 to 200 years ago, it would look extremely different. The land here was dense mixed forest, and you would have found approximately 85% forest cover right across our Eastern Ontario region. And this is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. And they were living here on the land. And as the European settlement came in, they would have seen drastic changes occur. And today, not a lot of this original forest can be seen. Next. So as the Europeans arrived and saw these dense mixed forests that were hard to even to move through, they were seen as a real barrier to settlement and a barrier to agriculture and to development. And so lands were mass cleared to make room for these towns and for people to come and live off the land and to grow the economy. Lands were also cleared for lumber and for potash manufacturing. And so mass amounts of trees were cleared off the landscape without an understanding yet of the impacts that would have. Next. And so by the 1880s, only 20 to 30% of that original forest remained in Eastern Ontario. Next. And so what was experienced as the forests were mass cleared was severe soil erosion and extreme and frequent flooding events, and of course, loss of a lot of habitat. And so the soils, the runoff was pulling the loose soil into our rivers and into our streams and into our lakes. It was causing phenomenal amounts of stress on the land, but also for the people who were, and the towns who were living and building and making a life on the land. Next. And so the province spearheaded replanting the landscape to try to combat all of these issues that were being seen. And millions of trees were being planted. There were 4 large tree nurseries that the province opened up and ran to grow the trees to get them back on the landscape. And so some of these 4 nurseries still exist today, but no longer provincially run. They are the nurseries that we continue to use as conservation authorities with the ministries to continue to put trees on the ground. So all of these efforts, they're still happening. And this deforestation, we're still feeling the effects of it. Next, please. And so many of today's forests you can see as conifer plantations, and it's not unusual where people will ask what's with all these trees in lines. Well, that's why they were a part of this reforestation effort. And there is still a lot of this conifer plantation going in. They're the trees that are very hardy. They grow relatively quickly. They cast some shade and build up a good soil base again in a forest floor environment where new growth can germinate and thrive. And then you get these second growth forests. So lands that were just left to be, ones that weren't suitable for farming, didn't get developed, didn't get turned into roads and railroads and all of the other great stuff that we enjoy today. They've gone through natural succession. I think I've lost a slide there. So we're just going to go into the forest cover slide. You can find that one. So we use a number of gauges to understand watershed health and how that is changing. And one of them is forest cover. And so every 5 years, or when we want to look, our geographical information system staff can do this all through mapping, can look at what our forest cover percentage looks like. So forests are incredibly important in intercepting and slowing that rainfall, as you can imagine, right? If you don't have forests there, the rain is just pounding on the ground and running downhill into the nearest water systems and dragging anything else with it. So those trees intercept and slow that. And as they intercept and slow that rainfall, they're reducing the runoff and the contaminants and soil and everything else that go with the runoff. So they're reducing the soil erosion. And also those forests are acting very much like sponges. And as they're slowing that water, it's allowing more water to be reabsorbed down into the ground instead of directly back into our water systems. So it's also having increased forest cover will help to slow the impacts of flooding. And so Environment Canada recommends a minimum of 30% forest cover. In our most recent watershed report card, we found that Prince Edward County was at around a 30% forest cover. So now just meeting the minimum. Now there's a lot of tree planting interest in Prince Edward County. I can say that through Forests Ontario tree planting program. And so I see that number increasing in the years to come as lands that aren't being used for farming, perhaps not as suitable for it, can be looked at it converting back to forests where forests want to be. Now, there are definitely some lands in the county where, well, in the county and across the watershed, where perhaps forests are not best suited for it due to its shallow soils to rock, but grasslands are something else that can be considered as a natural cover that have very similar benefits to forest cover. Next, please. So the next one is forest interior. And so the forest interior is another factor that we look at to gauge watershed health. So to figure out forest interior, we have to look at all the forest cover on the landscape and then remove a 100-meter buffer from that forest patch. And what remains is what we consider forest interior. And this gives us an idea of more pure forests and the size of the forests on the landscape. So a larger patch of forest is higher quality forest and less susceptible to human disturbance and to invasive species. We'd like to see more patches that are of larger size as opposed to the small sizes. And so Environment Canada recommends a minimum of 10% forest interior. And currently Prince Edward County is sitting at approximately 8%. And great news is we can all be a part of increasing that forest interior by just looking at our own lots. So next slide, please. No matter how big your land is or how small it is, I always like to encourage people to open up Google Earth and take a look at the landscape and how your lot fits into it. This image right here gives you an idea of that patchy landscape that we are a part of here. And if you have an opportunity to even help combine some of these patches with even a narrow corridor for wildlife to pass between, great. If you're a larger landholder and you see an area underutilized that you might be able to bring back to forest and actually expand some of these patches into bigger patches, we have programs to support you. The province has programs. Government of Canada is investing in the 2 billion tree program. A lot of support for landowners to help get trees on the ground for all the benefit it provides and for the climate change issue as well and the carbon sequestration that trees provide. Next, please. So some of those programs that I'm talking about, the 50 million tree program, this is a program heavily subsidized currently by the Government of Canada. If you are looking to plant a couple of acres or more on your property, apply at forestsontario.ca. This is one of what I'm sure are going to be several program options available to landowners, but this is a great one to start, or you can contact me and I can connect you to this program, as well as some other opportunities for getting trees on the ground, especially if you're under 2 acres. This is where we at Quinte Conservation may be able to assist you in acquiring some stock and some subsidized native tree stock. So the 50 million tree program, they'll plant for you. They machine plant primarily conifers with a mix of some other species in there. And then, as I mentioned, it's heavily subsidized. Typically, your landowner cost is somewhere between 40 to 50 cents per tree. Not a bad deal to have it all done for you. Agricultural buffer plantings, we do at Quinte Conservation. We have programs to support farmers to renaturalize zones next to water courses. And so this is to help reduce fertilizer and soil runoff into our water systems. So if you are a farmer, reach out and we can let you know what those programs look like through us. There are also cost sharing incentive programs for things like fencing livestock away from water systems, and cost sharing incentive programs for alternate watering structures and devices for livestock, and other measures that can be taken to protect water systems. And on that note, I'd also just like to acknowledge how incredible our farming community is. I'm also a member of the farming community, and my family has been for farming for 70 years. And I know firsthand, and I see it, how incredible our farmers are in terms of the conservation measures they've taken to protect the land and our water systems for as long as they've been farming. So we really value that partnership. And if you're looking for advice on how to restore habitat on your property, it could be a small waterfront property, an urban property, we can help with that as well. We can provide advice, and especially for waterfront property owners, we can provide some programs as well. Next, please. So just before we get into the Natural Edge program, riparian zone is something we look at quite regularly. Riparian is what's considered the 30-meter wide zone along the side of a water course or an open body of water. And so that riparian, that's where many of us are on the water's edge. We're right living, working, recreating right in that riparian zone. And I'm sure for many on here tonight, because you are Wellers Bay landowners. And so that zone is really important for helping to protect the water system. It helps in maintaining water temperatures through the shading of the offshore habitat. The vegetation, the branches of the shrubs and the roots of the vegetation help in holding the shoreline in place, and also slowing that runoff I was talking about earlier. It slows that runoff and helps to remove excess nutrients before it enters water systems. And then, just as we love to live along the water's edge, because our towns, our communities are built along water, we need water. Wildlife needs water, and wildlife need that riparian zone, that edge. And so Environment Canada recommends that there be a minimum of 50% forested riparian in any watershed to maintain good watershed health. And so this is where in all of our watersheds, we are below that recommended minimum. This is not a surprise. And our watersheds are pretty healthy. Our lakes and rivers are pretty healthy, but if there's anywhere that we can focus on and improve on, it would be increasing some of that riparian. So that link I have at the bottom of these slides goes to our watershed report cards. If you're interested in learning more, you can always click on that. It also goes into wetland cover and watershed health monitoring. So next slide, please. So thinking about your own waterfront lot, our waterfront lots can be a part of improving that riparian, and that doesn't mean your whole lot has to become a forest. We can have both. We can live on the water and we can have improved riparian to protect the water systems, but also provide crucial habitat for wildlife. And so when we're chatting with landowners about their properties, a lot of them you can see looking like year one. We have learned and perhaps been told that the most beautiful waterfront lots are the mowed, manicured lawns to the water with nothing to block views. But you can have your views, you can have your beautiful water access, you can have it all and still have some naturalized components on your lawn. And we are seeing a lot more of this. And I'm happy to say too, that last year and this year, we've had so much interest, it's hard to keep up in terms of the landowners who are wanting to learn more about how to do this on their waterfront lots. So we often recommend you start small. Make sure you approach it right in terms of how you want to maintain your views. Make sure that you keep your water access points, because we really want you to be happy with this, and start with a small buffer, but then expand as you get more comfortable. And this is all a part of a site visit that we offer through our shoreline renaturalization starter kits that I'll talk about briefly in a few slides. But here you can see you start along the edge, but you can easily bring vegetation up along the sides of your property. Larger trees and shrubs can even be great ways to create more privacy on your lot. And then, yeah, have a beautifully natural lot that contributes back to that forested riparian and protecting the lake and providing that habitat for so much wildlife that need it. Next, please. So here's a little example. Many of you would have experienced the erosion and perhaps extreme erosion experienced during our high water years, especially on Wellers Bay because of your connection to Lake Ontario. And so for a lot of you, plants may not be your immediate solution. A lot of you likely needed to resort to other means like sloped rock to hold your shoreline in place. We are working with a number of landowners to plant within and behind that sloped rock or riprap. And so this may work for some of you. Others, it may be more of the longer term solution after the immediate one. But the idea again is getting the medium and deep rooted vegetation into the ground, and the branches and the foliage of even the lower shrubs and grasses and wildflowers will help to break some of that rainfall, intercept it and slow it. So you shouldn't experience as much erosion. You can see in the image here, the depth of the grass roots compared to the shrubs and even the tree here, and even our native grasses. The roots go significantly deeper than just the lawn grass. So you could even just start with a part of your shoreline, especially where you see runoff may be directed down sloping in a certain area to the water. Maybe start by doing a little bit of a no-mow there. Just move to the next slide, please. So the no-mow is a great start. And maybe that's your end. Maybe that's all you're going to do, and that's fine. Creating that no-mow, you can imagine the benefit that that small buffer can provide. But if you want the true benefits, the long-term stability of your shoreline, you'd look at a mix of the shrubs, trees, and of course you can throw in some wildflowers. That's always a highlight to get some showy wildflowers on there. And work up to something that you can see here in the center. Next, please. So, as I mentioned earlier, when you're planning for your shoreline, just make sure that when you're planning, you're really taking into consideration maintaining your water views, how and what kind of wildlife you'd like to attract, and the kind of beauty that you'd like to see there. And so again, we're happy to come walk your shoreline and give you an idea of what you might want to consider and draft a planting plan for you. Next slide, please. Oh. So this shoreline that I'm mentioning is so important to so much wildlife is also called the ribbon of life. It's where over 70% of land-based wildlife, a space that they need at some point in their life cycle, and 90% of aquatic life depend on. So without having these even sections of naturalized shorelines, it has huge impacts on wildlife. Next, please. These shorelines are used as breeding grounds. Next. For rearing young and raising young. Next. They're resting sites and shelter sites for a whole diversity of wildlife and feeding and watering grounds. And basking areas for this threatened Blanding's turtle. Next, please. And there's our ruby-throated hummingbird feeding on a New England aster. So we're happy to get you started. What we have are shoreline renaturalization starter kits. So this is all thanks to a partnership with Watersheds Canada. And these have been wildly popular, which we're so happy to see. Our summer is very quickly filling up with site visits. So we will provide a free 40 to 60 minute free site visit, and then provide you with a customized planting plan with native plants specifically suited to your site. And then if you are interested, you can just take that planting plan and do what you'd like with it. We'll give you resources on where you can source native stock, the same sources that we use. Or if you'd like, we do have subsidized kits, which include 50 potted trees, shrubs, and wildflowers with mulch, tree protectors, and plant care guides. And that's to help you get started. For some of you, that might be enough for your property, but for others, maybe that is just a start for you. So currently that subsidized landowner cost is $250. Yeah, sorry, next. Yeah. And I just wanted to throw in this example. This was from a recent planting where we are planting into that sloped rock or riprap. So I know a lot of property owners on, well, especially east, west, Wellers Bay, you had to resort to this style of shoreline protection because of the extreme high waters causing some pretty severe erosion, something that plants can't just look after on their own. But bringing the plants in is what's going to create that longer term solution. It also softens that very hardened look of the rock. And so here we are planting right into the riprap and above the riprap. So we just move that rock, cut a hole into the fabric, dig a hole, and plant the vegetation. And so a lot of these are low shrubs and low flowering shrubs. So again, it won't obstruct views. Next, please. So I just threw in some pictures here of some of the typical plants that we would be putting on shorelines or recommending in those kits to landowners, things like chokeberry and buttonbush and wild roses. The wild roses especially are also great at deterring geese if geese are an issue for you. Geese don't like visual or physical obstructions, and so staggering some shrubs on a shoreline can send them off to someone else's lawn and not yours. Next. Dogwoods, and especially red osier dogwood, fantastic for shoreline remediation work. This is one where it's so easy, you could just cut the branches back in late winter, and as soon as the ground is thawed, push those red branches into your bank, and they will shoot their own roots right into the bank. So try to get them in a good 1 to 1.5 feet deep into the bank. Really great. Those branches also droop down over the shore and help to soften the wave action. Meadowsweet and St. John's wort, another couple of low flowering shrubs that are quite popular with waterfront property owners. Next. And And then we've got some wildflowers. Looks like my blue lobelia got flipped there, but you got the idea. As swamp milkweed, we have a couple of different monardas there, one that likes it a little more wet and one that likes it dry, and something like marsh marigold, if you've got that nice wet, rich, low area, those would thrive there too. Next, please. And again, just to showcase some of the beautiful native wildflowers that we have, we're always encouraging people to consider native wildflowers as opposed to ones from other regions of the world. In Europe and Asia, they're buying our native wildflowers and putting them in their gardens, and we're buying theirs. It's also how a lot of our native species or invasive species have become these invasive ones. We put them in our gardens because they were so beautiful, and then they loved our environment so much that they took off into our natural areas, and now they are out of control and pushing our native species out. So again, just to showcase how beautiful our native wildflowers are, and to consider putting those in our gardens and on our shorelines instead of ones that aren't native to our region. Next, please. And then the trees, a few of the trees that we typically plant on shorelines that can handle the wet and even the wet to dry, especially again for shorelines like yours, where you have the fluctuating water levels. It's important to consider. And things like black willow, they are pretty phenomenal at holding that shoreline and withstanding the high waters to low waters. Those are the trees you can still see standing on those Lake Ontario shorelines. So lots of neat tree species that could be put out there too. And then in terms of as they grow and get bigger, to maintain your views, I always remind landowners you can prune bottom branches, right? And if we can keep those on our shoreline, they're also casting that wonderful shade to help maintain that offshore habitat. Next, please. So there's my email, my contact information. If you are interested in any more information, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can also find all of this and more through our website under Learn and Get Involved at quintyconservation.ca.
Thank you, Maya. That was so interesting. And I'll open it up. Does anybody have any questions for Maya? I know I wrote down wild rose shrubs to deter geese because I am out there chasing them every day.
And they won't eat one.
Penny, I think Toby posted a couple of questions in the chat. And just, I think one of them was, you know, where does Lower Trent Conservation fit in with Wellers Bay and the Wellers Bay watershed? So Maya, to you.
Yeah, so the part of your watershed that sits in the Quinte West, then you're Lower Trent. So if you've needed to go for permitting, you would know if you're going that way. Again, it's just the watershed boundary, just, yeah, the one section of your lake goes that way. We have very similar programs, and we work together, Lower Trent and Quinte. Oh, a lot of those programs I mentioned are similar.
And that was definitely the root of my question there, Maya, for folks, is whether or not they're running similar programs, to know if they're in that region along the North Shore that sits in Quinte West territory, if they have access to the same programming you've just spoke about.
That's right. And we're all under the same umbrella, and we all work together and support each other. So a perfect example is if you had a landowner that sat in the Lower Trent region that wanted a natural edge shoreline kit, we'd be happy to step in and cover that through our program, because they currently don't have a kit program, but they do offer the site visits, and they do have their own set of programming. Not specifically the kit, but they would have some kind of a buffer planting program.
Fantastic. You had also mentioned that you folks at Quinte Conservation run some of the dams in the area. Is that true too of the Consicon Dam that goes from Consicon Lake into Wellers Bay at the south end here? Do you know?
Yeah, that's one that I can't speak on, but I would need to check with our water resources staff to get you details on that dam.
Sure.
But through our website, you can pull up information on all of the dams that we own and operate.
Great. And somebody had messaged me a question to ask you about planting along marshes. So a lot of times we talk about specifically that kind of open water idea of Weller's Bay, but what about folks who own maybe something that doesn't look so open, but the marshland water areas? Do those fit into your zone, or how does that apply?
Yeah, if you're asking whether we would consider that for shoreline planting, we do.
Yeah.
We have planted on properties that go on to wetlands.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you so much for you and your team for joining us tonight. So our next speaker will talk about the Love Your Lake program, and our speaker is Melissa Dakers. Melissa joined the Watersheds Canada team in 2015 after taking time to raise her two sons. During that time, Melissa was an active member of the Mississippi Lakes Association, where she was the water quality and lake steward on the board of directors for 12 years, and was an active co-chair and member of the environmental committee. She has also studied natural resource management at Guelph University and ecosystem management at Sir Sanford Fleming College. The Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority employed her for 6 years directly after she graduated as a water quality technician and watershed monitoring supervisor. Liaising with other agencies, partners, and lake stewards to promote and educate them on environmental practices is Melissa's passion. Melissa is currently is the Habitat and Stewardship Program Manager, looking after fish habitat restoration projects and the Love Your Lake regional delivery in Eastern Ontario. And so, Melissa, I'd like to welcome you and ask you to go ahead and start your presentation for us.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful evening so far. It's great to be with these other programs and these other ladies. They're all fantastic. And I really appreciate you guys having me out tonight. I wish this could be in person, but this is the next best thing, right? So thank you so much for everybody for joining us tonight. As was mentioned, my name is Melissa Dakers. Most people know me as Mel, and I am the Habitat and Stewardship Program Manager for Watersheds Canada. And just to let you know, some people may know that Heather Murphy runs the Love Your Lake program. Unfortunately, she has left us as of last week to pursue other opportunities. So currently I am running the regional delivery of the Love Your Lake program. And tonight I'll be sharing some information about the program, as well as our Pug-Nosed Shiner landowner engagement and shoreline habitat restoration project. It's a mouthful, but it is in the Quinte watershed, and it's funded by Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Next slide, please. So Watersheds Canada, with support of Quinte Conservation and community volunteers, are carrying out a targeted shoreline stewardship program focused on the Pug-Nosed Shiner habitat. This project is generously funded by Fisheries and Oceans Canada's Habitat Stewardship Program for Aquatic Species at Risk. And the emphasis of this project is to educate shoreline property owners on actions they can take on their lands to protect the Pug-Nosed Shiner, a species at risk. This region is actually one of the last remaining habitats for the Pug-Nosed Shiner, which are extremely vulnerable to declining watershed habitat quality. So activities for this project include carrying out shoreline assessments on every property on West Lake, East Lake, and Weller's Bay using our Love Your Lake program in partnership with the Canadian Wildlife Federation. We are also conducting shoreline restorations on properties using native species through our Natural Edge program, and Quinte Conservation already spoke about that. So thank you, Maya, for covering that. As well as Quinte Conservation will actually be completing invasive aquatic vegetation surveys on those 3 lakes as well. And through this project, we will also be developing communication materials to educate property owners on stewardship actions that will help restore the Pug-Nosed Shiner critical habitat. Our first video is available now online on Watersheds Canada's YouTube channel. So I encourage you to check that out, and it'll give you a bit more information on this fantastic project with Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Next slide, please. Okay, so you're probably wondering what a pug-nosed shiner is. The pug-nosed shiner is a member of part of the minnow family, and it's listed as a species at risk. And you can identify the pug-nosed shiner by its slender and small size, its small upturned mouth, and black lateral bands that around the snout and chin, and it goes through the eye to the front of the caudal fin or tail fin. This band ends with a small dark wedge-shaped caudal spot. So that's how you can identify them. They have transparent fins and are about 50 to 60 millimeters in length. So they're tiny guys, but they are in drastic decline right now. Males become brightly golden in color during spawning. So that's another key feature. So habitat loss and degradation is the principal threat to the pug-nosed shiner. And it may be a result of various factors, such as poor agricultural practices leading to siltation and turbidity, increases in lakeshore development, and the removal of aquatic vegetation, as well as human-induced changes in water quality and quantity. Next slide, please. So lakes are facing a lot of challenges right now, especially with the pandemic. People are looking for more natural areas to go, waterfront properties. More people are coming to them more now than ever. They're looking for that peace and tranquility in their lives, right? And I'm sure that's why many of you have decided to live on Wellers Bay or have property on Wellers Bay. And development pressures have dramatically increased the last few years. People are wanting to live at the lake. They're wanting to upgrade small cottages to more permanent residence. And a lot more people are bringing the city to the lake. But this is causing potential threats to our lakes as well. And that is what the Love Your Lake program is all about. It provides resources and education on actions that you can take on your individual property to help your lake. Sometimes people don't realize the importance of a healthy shoreline. And Maya covered a lot of this in her talk, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just a reminder, they provide the food and habitat. 70% of land-based species and 90% of aquatic species require a healthy shoreline to survive. And they filter chemicals and sediment and bacteria from entering your water. They prevent soil erosion. They reduce impacts of flooding, and they produce a source of enjoyment for everyone. Next slide, please. So the Love Your Lake program is scheduled for early to mid-July on Wellers Bay. And I'll give you a bit of detail about what it's all about. So we'll be carrying out shoreline assessments on every property by boat. We don't enter your property at all. It's all done by observation only. We use a standardized assessment protocol to document shoreline habitat. And we also look at vegetation communities, erosion. We note special opportunities for landowner stewardship on your property. Every property will get an individualized, personalized report with details on the state of their shoreline and recommended actions for improving your lake health. Next slide, please. So a program introduction letter was mailed out to all property owners on Westlake, Eastlake, and Wellers Bay. So you may have already received yours, or it should be coming to you soon in the mail. It talks about our program and gives you an idea of where we are and what's going to be happening. So along with your letter, you'll receive a value survey, and we ask you to complete this and return it to us. The survey is also available online if you would prefer to do it that way instead of a paper copy, that's fine. Currently, we are, that's okay, sometimes slides screw up. Currently, we are on West Lake. So we started West Lake this morning, and we're conducting those shoreline assessments first, and then we'll be moving to Wellers Bay next. So it'll probably be early July. Wellers Bay has approximately 368 properties, give or take, to assess. So we'll be out there for a good 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the weather and also the availability of volunteer boat drivers. We're always looking for people to help tour us around the lake and to talk to us about the lake. So if that's something that interests you, please contact the Wellers Bay Association, and we will get in touch with you. We would really appreciate the help. Once our data is collected and put into our database, reports will be generated over the fall and winter. And then property owners will be mailed out an individual property code to download their specific report in the spring of 2022. It's usually around April or May. And I want to be clear, reports are private. Okay, no one has access to their neighbor's report. So privacy is a huge issue for us, and we take that very, very seriously. So nobody sees anybody else's report. Nobody has access to anybody else's report. Next slide, please. We also generate a value survey summary report based on those surveys that you take at the beginning of the season. And we will provide that to your association, and it just outlines, it'll be a generalization, a summary of all of your property owners' concerns and values. And it's really, really helpful because it allows you to see what people find important, what they find there's a concern for, and it'll lead you to more stewardship action on your lake. We also generate what's called a lake level report. And this summarizes all the shoreline assessment data, but it is very general. It's no private information is given in the report. So it doesn't say John Doe has this on his property and is causing this. It just says overall your lake is 20% natural or this much development. And it gives you actions on a lake-wide basis of what stewardship actions you guys can take part in. Next slide, please. So there are many long-term benefits to participating in the Love Your Lake program. Sorry, next slide. Oh, go back one. Sorry, you changed the picture. I was thrown off by there's a kayak on mine. Anyway, so there are many long-term benefits to participating in the Love Your Lake program and our Pug Nose Shiner landowner engagement and shoreline habitat restoration program. We provide education and stewardship actions that you and your community can use to improve and protect the local habitat in for your individual properties, and it'll have a great impact on Wellers Bay as a whole. Okay, next slide, please. And I want to leave you with one final thought. I want you to think about what brought you to your property on Wellers Bay. What do you love about your property? Is it the wildlife? Is it the peace it brings you? Is it looking out at the water and the calmness and the peace of the water? Everyone can do their part to help and protect Wellers Bay. It starts with one person. And if everybody collectively did one thing on their property, that bay would improve over time, and your future generations can enjoy it too. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Mel. That was amazing and very, very interesting. And we're very appreciative that this program is available to us and the information that it's going to bring not only to landowners, property owners, but also to Friends of Wellers Bay and our partner organizations that are involved in this as well. We're so pleased to be participating, and we will be reaching out to our membership and our community to try and muster up some volunteer boat drivers and help facilitate that process for you, and sort of watching closely as you progress, and being involved in the different sort of decision-making points or report points where we can be involved and reach out and collaborate. As Maya said earlier, how important that collaboration is. Does anyone have any questions specifically for the Love Your Lake program at this time? For Mel?
Karen, one of the ones we've received on social media about the Love Your Lake program that maybe Mel, you can speak to, is to be a boat driver for this, to volunteer. How much time is required? Like, what kind of draw is this? And what are there specific requirements of the boat or the driver that are necessary to participate?
Yeah, so any amount of time that you can volunteer is greatly appreciated. Our interns usually go out for the day, so it's up to you. We've had, I know on Westlake, we had a boat driver today that wanted to be out there all day. So they were out there from 9 in the morning till 4 o'clock, and they brought their lunches. They took a pit stop lunch break. But I mean, if you have 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it takes, that would be fantastic too. And we can arrange multiple boat drivers in a day. That's great. On average, our assessors today did 54 properties today. So that's kind of our average, depending on weather, obviously, and availability. We do ask that you have your pleasure craft license, so your boater's license, that's a must, as well as insurance on your boat as well. We have a boat driver's agreement that the boat driver can fill out, as well as a confidentiality agreement. So that just shows that that as a boat driver, you're not going to go around talking about other people's properties and private information, because that's very important to us to have that private confidentiality. But other than that, just we love to be toured around. We love when boat drivers can tell us about the history and how long they've been on there, and if they can give us information about, oh yeah, I know that's so-and-so's property from this line to this line, that's really, really helpful information. Or no, that shoreline is actually really natural, that rock has always been there, or that beach has always been there. That information really helps us.
That's great. Thanks, Mel. And I didn't realize that 2 to 3 hours was sufficient for anybody. So that makes it a lot more accessible. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. And you can do it multiple times. So if you want to do it a couple days in a row because you've had so much fun with us, that's great too. We do have 2 assessors that will be going out together. So it's Mario and Philip, and they're great guys, and they're really out there to have fun and to get the job done. So they're great to be around.
So they don't need a lot of room either. This isn't a big boat event, obviously.
No, I mean, we try to get to as close as possible to the shoreline. Now we know with the low water levels, we're having a little bit of difficulty. I know on Westlake, a couple volunteers actually couldn't get their boats off the lift. So they are now stranded, which is not great. Pontoons work really well, but so do other boats too. We've been in small aluminum boats, just enough to be a little bit of distance. Obviously with COVID, we want to be safe as well. Our assessors are vaccinated with their first dose, just to let you know that. And if you require them to wear a mask at all times, that's fine too. We're happy to oblige that.
Wonderful. And there's a note in the chat here. What should folks do if they haven't yet received their letter?
Okay, give it another week. Sometimes the mail's really slow lately. I think they were just mailed out last week-ish. So give it another week. If you don't receive it, let either yourself or Karen know, and let me know. And if you have an email address, I can send it to like the general letter and survey to you guys, and then you can just forward it to them if you would like. I can do that tomorrow, actually. So anybody can contact you, and we can forward it to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Mel.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you. So any other questions on for Mel, for Maya, for Amelia, general Friends of Wellers Bay questions, anything anybody wants to ask at this time? We're all captive, so ask away.
It's Lynn Mitchell. Mel, this is just a question. You're talking about doing the all the audits within Waters Bay and Westlake. Is there anything like that going on Lake Ontario, just west of the county?
Not yet. Right now, our program is focused on inland lakes. So okay. Yeah, the larger bodies of water, we haven't tackled that yet.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. But just to let you guys all know too, we have now assessed 173 lakes across Canada.
Wow, that's impressive. Sorry, there's one question that just came in now. Oh, this could be for actually Mel or Maya. Are there plants appropriate for sandy shores? I'm thinking around the Natural Edge program.
Yeah, what I would encourage you to do is contact me and we'll set you up for a site visit. We have done plantings on sandy shores, and I have 2 municipal park shoreline plantings that are sandy, like almost beach sandy, that we have been planting and monitoring for a number of years now. So I have an idea of what can thrive on a sandy shoreline that experiences both high water and low water drought in the summer. So it's not a huge diversity, but we have had some success. So a few of those species would be meadowsweet, wild roses. There are 4 different kinds of wild roses. And so the ones that can thrive in the hot, dry, so something like a pasture rose, tends to do well. We've had success with 9-bark, so that's another lower shrub. And then the other thing is they're all going to be on the smaller side. So in terms of maintaining views, yeah, you'll be good. And then there are a number of wildflowers that can really thrive in those conditions. And so yeah, a couple of the sites that I'm thinking of, especially one, we've done mostly wildflowers there, and they're thriving with a line of shrubs in behind, and it's also helping to deter geese. So that's also another advantage. So definitely reach out to us, because we do have some success with that one.
And I'll just add, so we had our shoreline planted 2 years ago through the watersheds, the Natural Edge program. And, we have a lot of sand, and there are definitely plants that are doing well in that area. And forgive me because I don't remember what they're called, but they're still growing, and they're green, so it's all good. But and again, it was through the Natural Edge program, and Maya, I think you were helping to plant that day. And so, there are definitely some options for more sandy shorelines, and I can attest to that. I'd be happy to share photos, actually, if you'd like me to. Anyway, so anything else? Any other questions? I don't think I saw any more come in. So I would just like to close by saying thank you so much to Maya and Melissa and Amelia, And, one thing that really struck me as each presentation, as we were going through each presentation, and all the programs that we're involved in and that are being offered to us, they're so sort of closely connected to each other and synergistic almost in terms of the kinds of information that we're gathering and the work that's being done on the shorelines. It's kind of a beautiful thing to see, actually. And we're very grateful that we can be a part of facilitating some of that to happen as Friends of Wellers Bay. So just a few things that I'd also just like to thank the participants tonight. This has been a great session. I know I've learned a lot, and hopefully you have as well. And please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach us by email at friendsofwellersbay@gmail.com. Or through our social media. We're happy to point you in the right direction if you have any questions, or answer your questions ourselves. So a couple of last bullet points. As we mentioned, this has been recorded and it's going to be on the Friends of Wellers Bay website. And we have a number of events coming up. So we talked about the Water Rangers testing, and that's happening at the end of every month. Again, just reach out to us if you want to be involved in that. Love Your Lake coming up in early July. For several weeks, they'll be on the water. So we'll be looking for volunteers for that. Our AGM, Friends of Wellers Bay AGM, is coming up August 10th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Again, register at the moment through friendsofwellersbay@gmail.com. And then we are planning a trash bash and beach cleanup on August the 14th. And you will see details on our social media sites as well as our website on that upcoming event. We're busy, we have lots to do, and there's lots of, there are lots of really good things happening right now. And I guess the last thing that I will ask, again, if you're not a member, please consider becoming one, so that we can all work together to, on that safe navigation of the channel, and keep up the programming that we're hoping to as we move into the future. So thank you again very much for participating. Thank you to our speakers, and have a great rest of your evening. It looks like it might be a beautiful sunset on Wellers Bay yet again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you very much. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Well, thoughts?
I think overall, it's Penny. I think it went overall, it was pretty good. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to those couple of slides.